I'm Natasha, and today we're going to work on improving your English listening and writing skills. How do we do this? By listening to real-life stories that will help you connect with English in a practical way. Whether you're trying to improve your vocabulary, understand natural conversation, or enhance your writing, this episode has something for you. So, don't forget to hit the like button if you find this episode helpful. And let's dive into the topic of overcoming challenges. Let me start with a quick question for you. Have you ever faced a situation where everything seemed difficult, but somehow you managed to get through it? It could be anything, like studying for an important exam or even managing to fix something at home. Think about it for a second, and let me tell you a story about how I faced a challenge in my life. A few years ago, I was planning a big family event for my husband and his relatives. It was supposed to be a surprise anniversary party, but about a week before the event, the venue we booked suddenly canceled. I was in a panic. The first thing I did was take a deep breath and think about all the possible solutions. My husband didn't know about the party, so I couldn't tell him. After some serious thinking, I decided to switch to a different venue. But this meant I had to inform all the guests, rearrange the food, and plan the decorations in just a few days. It was stressful, but what I learned from that experience was that staying calm and focused is key to solving any problem. I'll tell you this, it wasn't easy, but I managed to get everything ready in time, and the event turned out even better than I imagined. In the end, everyone was happy, and I felt proud of how I handled the challenge. What's your story? Think about a time when you had to solve a problem, whether big or small. Did you manage to stay calm, or did you feel overwhelmed? You see, challenges are part of life, and facing them is a skill we all need. It's like learning a language. It's not always easy, but with practice, you'll improve. Speaking of challenges, let me tell you another story about my friend Daniel. Daniel was always afraid of speaking English in public. He could understand the language well, but when it came to speaking, he got nervous. One day, he was invited to a dinner with his coworkers, and he decided it was time to face his fear. At first, he stumbled a little while speaking, but over time, he became more confident. Now, Daniel is the one who leads meetings and speaks to clients in English. It took time and practice, but the key was facing his fear. I'm sure many of you have experienced something similar, where fear or nervousness tried to hold you back. The thing is, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. So when you're listening to this podcast, think about how you can apply the same principle to your English practice. Maybe you struggle with listening to fast speakers, or maybe you find it hard to understand certain accents. Remember, it's okay to make mistakes. It's all part of the learning process. And here's another important point. Writing skills are also closely connected to listening. The more you listen to real-life conversations like the stories we're sharing, the better you'll understand how sentences are structured, how to use words in different contexts, and even how to express yourself more naturally. It's like building a bridge between listening and writing. So don't just focus on one skill. Work on both. Before we move forward, think about the stories I shared. Can you relate to any of them? Perhaps you've had a challenge at work or in your personal life that you had to overcome. That's the beauty of real-life stories. They're something everyone can relate to, and they're a great way to practice your English. So, here's your task for today. As you listen to this episode, think about how you can improve your own communication. Whether it's through writing or speaking, remember to focus on how you express your thoughts. How can you make your sentences clearer? What new words can you try using? The more you practice, the easier it will get. Stay tuned for more real-life stories and tips that will help you improve your English. We upload new videos regularly on this channel to help you improve every day. Keep listening, keep practicing, and you'll see progress before you know it. If you're new here, Make sure to subscribe and press the like button if you're enjoying the content. You'll find more tips and real-life stories to help you practice and improve your English skills. Now let's dive into another story. This one's about my friend Rachel, who had to move to a new country for work. It was a big change for her. Imagine moving to a place where you didn't speak the language very well, and everyone around you was speaking fast. Rachel faced this challenge head-on. She made it a point to speak with people every day, even if it was just ordering food or asking for directions. She learned quickly, not because she was perfect at speaking, but because she kept trying. Her listening skills improved by hearing real conversations, and her writing skills also got better as she practiced more. Now, let's talk about how to apply the lessons from these stories to your own English learning journey. Take a moment and think about something you want to improve in your English skills. Maybe you find listening to native speakers difficult, or you struggle to express yourself clearly when writing. Whatever it is, know that with time, you can get better. For example, my friend Tom once told me about his struggle with understanding English speakers who talk quickly. He used to get frustrated when he couldn't catch everything they said, but instead of giving up, he started listening to podcasts, just like this one, over and over again. At first, he couldn't understand much, but he didn't let that stop him. He took notes on new words, listened to the same episode multiple times, and tried to understand the context of the conversation. Gradually, his listening improved, and so did his ability to respond in English. Today, Tom is able to have real conversations with native speakers, and his confidence has grown. You might be thinking, but how can I practice listening and writing in a way that's not too overwhelming? Well, one helpful strategy is to listen to short stories or everyday conversations like the ones I'm sharing with you today. You don't need to listen to a full hour of material right away. Start small. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes of listening practice each day. This way, you can focus on understanding a few key points at a time, and you won't feel rushed. Plus, by writing down your thoughts after listening, you'll reinforce what you've learned. For example, after hearing a story, try writing a short summary in English. What did you learn from the story? How did the characters handle their challenges? You could even write about a similar experience of your own. Writing in English helps your brain make connections between the words you hear and the sentences you create, which will help you in real conversations. Let me tell you another story that might help you understand how listening and writing work together. A couple of months ago, I had a conversation with Sarah, a friend of mine who's been learning English for a while. She told me that one of the hardest parts of her learning process was understanding new vocabulary in conversations. She would hear a word in a sentence and feel lost. To improve, Sarah decided to write down any new words she heard during her daily commute. She would look them up, write their meanings, and try using them in sentences. Slowly, she noticed that she wasn't just hearing those words more clearly, but she was also able to use them when speaking with others. Sarah's approach helped her in many ways. By listening to real conversations and practicing writing down new words, she not only expanded her vocabulary, but also felt more confident in conversations. This shows that practicing both listening and writing is essential to improving your English skills. The more you practice, the better you will get at using what you hear in real conversations, and the more natural it will become. Now think about your own learning style. How can you incorporate both listening and writing into your routine? Maybe you can listen to a podcast in the morning and write down new phrases in a journal. Or perhaps you could listen to an English conversation at lunch and then practice writing a summary in English when you get home. The key is consistency. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel. Let me tell you about another friend of mine, Mike. Mike works in a company where most of his colleagues speak English, but Mike's English skills were not very strong at the time. He knew he needed to improve, especially when it came to writing emails and reports. One day, Mike decided to set a goal for himself. Every day, he would listen to an English podcast while having his breakfast. After listening, he would write a short summary of what he understood and send it to himself as a reminder. Over time, his writing improved because he was constantly practicing. Mike didn't just listen passively. He interacted with the content by writing down what he learned, which helped him reinforce his skills. Now, Mike, think about your daily routine. Can you find a moment to listen to something in English and write about it afterward? Even a short 10-minute practice session can help you make significant progress over time. Keep in mind that the goal is not to be perfect right away. It's about taking small, consistent steps and building on what you already know. To help you with this, let's do a small exercise. I'll tell you a short story, and after listening, I want you to try writing a few sentences about what you learned or what stood out to you from the story. Ready? Here it goes. A few weeks ago, my friend Emily had to move to a new city for her job. She didn't know anyone there, and she felt nervous about starting over in a new place. But instead of focusing on the negative, she decided to take action. Emily joined a local community group and started attending social events. She made new friends and quickly became comfortable in her new environment. It wasn't easy, but Emily showed that with a positive attitude and a willingness to take risks, you can overcome any challenge. Now take a moment and write down your thoughts. How do you think Emily felt before and after moving? How can you relate to her experience? Remember, writing down your ideas helps solidify your understanding and improve your English skills. So, how did that exercise go? Writing, just like speaking, is a skill that improves the more you practice it. Whether it's through storytelling, reflecting on your day, or summarizing things you've learned, writing in English will help you express yourself more clearly and confidently. Let's continue with another important part of improving your English skills: making connections between what you hear and what you write. It's not enough just to listen passively. To really improve your English, you need to actively engage with the material and reflect on what you're learning. This means you can take what you hear from conversations, podcasts, or even TV shows and transform that information into something that strengthens both your listening and writing abilities. I'm going to explain how you can do that with some simple examples. Let's start with a story from my friend James. James had been studying English for a couple of years but was always hesitant to write because he felt his writing wasn't good enough. One day, he listened to a podcast about time management, something he was interested in. As he listened, he wrote down the main points that the host was discussing. Later that evening, he decided to write an email to himself in English, summarizing the podcast. He focused on writing about the key points he had learned and how he could apply them to his own life. The next day, James read his email again, and he realized something incredible. By writing down his thoughts in English, he had not only improved his writing but also reinforced what he had learned from the podcast. His ability to understand and use the information had grown because he had engaged with it in two ways: by listening and writing. This made him feel more confident, and now James makes it a habit to listen to English podcasts, write a short summary, and reflect on how the lesson applies to his life. He told me that this method had made a huge difference in his English skills, and it had also helped him feel more comfortable writing longer pieces in English, like essays and reports. James's story is an example of how combining listening with writing can really improve your skills. It's not just about hearing words, it's about processing the information, understanding it, and then expressing it in your own words. This active engagement is what helps move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. Now, let me give you another example that's close to home. A few months ago, I helped my friend Anna, who had recently moved to an English-speaking country. She was struggling with understanding how people spoke in casual, everyday situations. At first, she didn't quite get how to respond to simple questions like, "How's your day going?" or "What did you do this weekend?" She understood the words, but the context and casual nature of the conversation were throwing her off. So I gave Anna an exercise. After we had a conversation, I asked her to write down the key points we discussed and then reflect on what was said. She had to note the questions and think about how she would respond in a similar situation. We practiced this every day. Slowly, but surely, Anna started feeling more comfortable responding naturally. She realized that in everyday conversations, people often don't use complex sentences. It's not about speaking perfect English. It's about being able to communicate clearly and confidently. This is something many learners struggle with, but it's also something that can be easily improved with practice. Let's break it down further. How can you use this method in your own English learning journey? Think about the conversations you have, whether they're with friends, family, or coworkers. When someone asks you a simple question in English, how do you respond? Are you nervous, or do you feel confident? And when you listen to English content, like a podcast, a YouTube video, or even a movie, do you take time to reflect on what was said? Do you think about how you would respond in a similar situation? By doing this, you start to actively engage with the language. Let's say you're listening to a podcast about a new restaurant that opened in town. As you listen, make notes about the key points. What kind of food do they serve? What is the atmosphere like? Are there any special offers or events? Then when you're done listening, take a moment to reflect on what you heard. How would you describe this restaurant to someone? What would you tell a friend if they asked about it? This practice can help you improve not only your listening, but also your speaking and writing. You're taking the information you've learned and using it in your own way. This is the key to becoming fluent in any language, learning to make the language your own. To help you understand this concept better, let me tell you another story. This one is about a friend of mine named Jack. Jack is an English teacher, and he often shares stories about his students' progress. One of his students, Sarah, was struggling to speak confidently in front of a group. Sarah was very shy and always worried about making mistakes. Jack noticed this, and he suggested she practice writing down her thoughts in English after every lesson. He told her to write about her day, what she had learned, and what she was planning to do next. At first, Sarah wasn't sure how this would help, but after a few weeks of writing regularly, she noticed a change. Writing helped Sarah organize her thoughts more clearly, which then made it easier for her to speak. She no longer felt overwhelmed when asked to present in front of her classmates. She could refer to her written notes for guidance. Over time, Sarah's confidence grew, and she became more comfortable speaking English in front of others. She shared with Jack that the practice of writing every day had been key to improving her speaking skills. This story highlights how writing can be a bridge to improving speaking and listening skills. When you write in English, you are forced to think about grammar, vocabulary, and sentence structure. The more you practice writing, the easier it becomes to organize your thoughts when you speak or listen to others. Writing allows you to internalize the language and helps you feel more confident in using it. Now, let's talk about some ways you can implement these strategies into your daily routine. First, you should set aside time each day for listening practice. Whether it's listening to a podcast, watching a short video, or listening to a conversation in English, try to find something that interests you. It could be a topic about travel, technology, or even a story about someone's life. As you listen, jot down any new words or phrases you hear. Try to understand them in context and think about how you can use them in your own sentences. Next, take time to write about what you've listened to. It doesn't have to be a long essay, just a few sentences about the main ideas. For example, After listening to a podcast about healthy living, you might write, "The speaker talked about the importance of eating healthy food and exercising regularly. They also mentioned that taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your body." This simple exercise helps reinforce what you've learned and improves your writing skills at the same time. Finally, don't forget to speak. Even if it's just talking to yourself, practice using the new words and phrases you've learned. The more you speak, the more natural it will feel, and the faster you'll improve. Remember, learning a language is a journey. There will be moments when it feels challenging, but if you keep practicing by listening, writing, and speaking every day, you will see progress. It's not about being perfect, it's about making consistent improvements. Each time you listen to a story, each time you write a sentence, and each time you speak in English, you're getting better. So, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Let's continue to explore more techniques and ideas to enhance your English skills. If you're truly committed to improving your listening and writing abilities, one of the best things you can do is immerse yourself in real-world conversations. In this part of the episode, I want to give you some ideas about how to listen to conversations around you, whether in person or online, and how to turn that listening experience into useful writing practice. I'll also share more stories and examples of how this technique has worked for people I know, like my friend Kate. Kate is a great example of how listening and writing can go hand in hand. She told me about an experience she had at work. Kate works at an office, and every week there's a team meeting where everyone shares updates on their projects. At first, Kate felt nervous about speaking during the meeting because she wasn't confident in her English skills. But one day, she decided to listen more actively. She focused on what her colleagues were saying during the meeting, taking notes in English. She didn't worry about writing down every word. Instead, she wrote down the main ideas. After the meeting, Kate went back to her desk and wrote a summary of everything that had been discussed. She realized that by listening to the meeting and writing about it later, she not only improved her listening skills, but also practiced writing in a work-related context. This made her feel more prepared for the next meeting because she could use the vocabulary she had learned and even practice writing responses to questions she might be asked. This approach worked so well for her that now Kate writes daily summaries of the meetings, and she also feels more confident speaking because she knows she's actively improving her English through both listening and writing. This technique is something you can try as well. It doesn't matter if you're listening to a conversation at work, at school, or even just a casual chat between friends. There's always something to learn. The key is to not just listen, but to think about how you can summarize what you've heard and write about it. You can also use this technique when you listen to podcasts, news broadcasts, or even YouTube videos. In fact, many learners I know have used this strategy to improve both their writing and listening simultaneously. Let's take another example from my friend Thomas. Thomas is a university student studying business administration. He told me that one of his biggest struggles in English was understanding the academic language used in his textbooks and lectures. So Thomas started listening to podcasts related to his field. These podcasts explained complex business concepts in simple, everyday language, and Thomas could follow along more easily. After listening to each podcast, Thomas would take notes, focusing on the most important points. Then he would write a short essay summarizing what he had learned. In the beginning, Thomas wasn't sure if this method would work, but after just a few weeks, he noticed huge improvements in both his listening comprehension and his writing ability. Not only did his academic listening skills improve, but his writing became clearer and more structured as well. The best part was that Thomas started feeling more confident when writing essays for his classes, and his professors noticed the improvement in his work. The reason Thomas succeeded was because he was actively engaging with the content he was listening to. He wasn't just letting the information go in one ear and out the other. Instead, he processed the information, reflected on it, and then used it in his writing. This cycle of listening, reflecting, and writing is incredibly powerful for improving your English skills. It gives you the chance to use new vocabulary, test your understanding of concepts, and practice expressing your thoughts clearly. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how you can use listening and writing to improve your conversation skills. One of the things I've learned from my own experience is that listening closely to conversations, whether they're happening in your native language or in English, can teach you a lot about natural speech patterns and how to respond in everyday situations. When I first started learning English, I found it difficult to understand the flow of casual conversations. People would speak so quickly, and I would often miss the meaning of certain words. Over time, though, I started paying more attention to how people naturally respond in conversations. For example, in English, when someone asks, "How are you?" a typical response isn't just, "I'm good" or "I'm fine." People might say, "I'm doing great, thanks for asking," or "I'm okay, but a little tired." These small details can make a huge difference in how natural you sound when you speak. When I realized how important it was to understand these small nuances, I began listening to conversations on podcasts, paying attention to how people responded to simple questions. Afterward, I would write down different responses that I could use in my own conversations. Then I practiced these phrases aloud. The more I practiced, the more natural it felt. I wasn't just memorizing words or phrases. I was learning how to sound like a native speaker by mimicking the rhythm and flow of real conversations. This method can also help you with both your speaking and your writing. For instance, if you listen to a conversation about a family vacation, you could write about what the speakers talked about, where they went, what they did, and what they enjoyed most. Writing it down helps reinforce the new vocabulary and expressions, and you can then use the same phrases when you're talking to others. Another example comes from my friend Lucy. Lucy had been struggling to write emails in English, especially when they were related to work. She found it hard to express herself clearly and professionally. So she decided to start listening to business podcasts that focused on email writing and communication. She would listen to the episodes, taking notes about the most useful phrases for writing professional emails. Afterward, Lucy practiced writing emails using these phrases. Over time, Lucy noticed a significant improvement in her email writing skills. She could write emails that were clear, polite, and professional, without feeling stuck or unsure about her choice of words. This also helped her with her listening skills, as she was more comfortable understanding the language used in business settings. By listening, reflecting, and practicing through writing, Lucy was able to improve her English in both a practical and professional way. Let's think about how you can apply this in your own life. Maybe you don't work in an office or study business, but you can still listen to conversations in English and use what you hear in your own way. For example, if you enjoy cooking, you could listen to cooking shows or podcasts in English. Afterward, write about the recipes you've learned or the tips the hosts shared. Or, if you enjoy sports, listen to interviews with players or coaches and write about what you've learned. These simple activities can help you build your vocabulary and improve both your writing and listening skills at the same time. One of the things that I always remind myself and my students is that English learning doesn't have to be complicated. The best way to improve is to make it a part of your everyday life. You don't need to sit in a classroom all day to learn English. You can learn from real-world conversations, whether you're listening to a podcast, a news broadcast, or even a casual chat between friends. The key is to stay engaged with the material and to reflect on what you've learned. You can write down what you hear, summarize it, and think about how it fits into your own life. By using this approach, you'll gradually start to feel more confident in both your listening and writing skills. You'll be able to express yourself more clearly, understand others better, and feel more comfortable using English in a variety of situations. So keep listening, keep writing, and keep practicing. You're doing great, and the more you practice, the easier it will get. Let's dive even deeper into how we can continue improving our English by focusing on listening and writing together. If you really want to make progress, the key is practicing both skills every day in real-life situations. This helps you not only understand English, but also use it naturally when speaking or writing. In this part, I want to share how I learned to improve my writing skills through listening, and I will give you some more ideas on how you can do this as well. I'll also tell you a few more examples of people who use this method successfully, including my friend Ben. Ben is a software engineer who works with international clients. A few months ago, he found that while he was great at listening to instructions in English during team meetings, he struggled when it came to writing clear and professional emails. His colleagues and clients spoke English fluently, but Ben still had a hard time putting together concise emails. He realized that to improve his writing, he had to listen to more real-world examples of professional communication in English. So, Ben started listening to business podcasts that focus on topics like effective email communication, writing reports, and dealing with clients. One of his favorite podcasts is The English Business Conversation, which talks about the common phrases and vocabulary used in business contexts. As he listened to each episode, Ben would pause the podcast and take notes on key phrases, expressions, and vocabulary that he could use in his own emails. He was learning not only how to write more effectively, but also how to sound more natural in his professional communication. After listening to an episode, Ben would write an email or a report using the phrases and expressions he had learned. He would sometimes send it to a friend for feedback, asking them to review his writing for clarity and accuracy. This method worked wonders for Ben. He noticed that over time, his emails became more polished, and he was able to express his ideas more clearly. His clients even commented on how professional and well-written his emails were. The reason for Ben's success was that he took what he had heard in the podcast and applied it directly to his work. He wasn't just listening passively. He was actively using what he had learned to improve his own skills. This kind of listening to writing practice can be applied in many areas of life. For example, imagine you're preparing for an interview. You could listen to interviews with people who are in the same field as you, and then, after listening, write a summary of the main points they discussed. If you want to prepare for a job interview, listen to podcasts where interviewees share their experiences and then write down some of their answers. By doing this, you'll be practicing both your listening and writing skills. Plus, you'll gain useful insights that can help you feel more confident when you actually have an interview. Another great example comes from my friend Alice, who works in a hospital as a nurse. Alice is always looking for ways to improve her communication skills with patients. While she's already good at speaking with patients in English, she wanted to improve her ability to write detailed medical reports. Alice started listening to medical podcasts in English to learn the specific language and vocabulary used in the healthcare field. She focused on how doctors and nurses explain diagnoses, treatment plans, and patient care in clear and simple language. After each podcast episode, Alice would write down a summary of the case discussed, using the medical terms she had learned. She practiced writing as if she were explaining the case to another healthcare professional, ensuring that her language was accurate and precise. This method helped her not only improve her medical vocabulary, but also her ability to write professional medical reports in English. Alice was able to communicate more effectively with her colleagues, and her writing became much clearer and more detailed. By listening to these podcasts and practicing writing what she had learned, Alice boosted both her listening and writing skills simultaneously. This method of using real-world examples in your listening and writing practice is incredibly powerful. If you can find content that matches your interests or career, you will be able to practice English in a way that feels meaningful and relevant to your life. It makes the learning process more engaging, and it helps you remember what you've learned because you're applying it to something you care about. You could try listening to interviews with professionals in your field, podcasts that discuss everyday life situations, or even just regular conversations between people in your area of interest. Another important thing to keep in mind when using this listening writing method is to focus on understanding the meaning behind the words. When you're listening, don't just try to hear individual words or phrases. Instead, pay attention to the overall message. Ask yourself, what is the speaker trying to convey? How can I use this idea in my own conversations or writing? This kind of active listening will help you improve your comprehension skills, and it will also make your writing more meaningful and coherent. For instance, when you're listening to a podcast or watching a video, try to take notes on the main ideas rather than writing down everything word for word. You can then summarize these ideas in your own words, which will help improve both your listening and writing skills. Let's say you're listening to a podcast about how to stay productive during the day. After listening, instead of just writing down phrases like stay organized or set goals, try to summarize the main points. In order to stay productive, it's important to plan your day and take breaks to avoid burnout. This exercise will help you better understand the material, and it will also give you practice writing in a more structured and coherent way. This method also helps with speaking, because once you've written down your thoughts and organized your ideas in English, you can use these ideas in conversations. For example, if you've listened to a podcast about healthy eating habits, you could write a paragraph about it and then try to talk about it with a friend or colleague. As you speak, you'll be using the vocabulary and ideas you've learned in both your writing and listening exercises. This will help you feel more confident and natural when speaking in English, as you've already internalized the vocabulary and ideas through your listening and writing practice. Now, let's take a closer look at how listening and writing can help you improve your everyday communication skills. If you're planning a trip or preparing for a vacation, listening to travel podcasts or videos can help you learn the phrases and vocabulary you'll need. You could listen to episodes about booking flights, checking into hotels, or ordering food at restaurants. After listening, write down the phrases you think will be useful, and then practice using them. For example, you could write about your ideal vacation and include phrases like, I'd love to visit the beach, or my favorite activity is hiking. This way, you'll feel more confident when speaking or writing about travel in English. For everyday situations like going to the doctor, shopping, or attending a social event, listening to conversations in English can also help you prepare. Listen to a podcast where people talk about how they deal with medical appointments or shop for groceries. Afterward, write down the important phrases and vocabulary and use them to practice your own responses. If you listen to a conversation where someone asks for directions, you can write about the best way to give directions in English. This method will help you feel more confident and ready for everyday situations. One final example of how this method can work comes from my friend George, who wanted to improve his English for travel purposes. George loves to travel and often goes to different countries for business and leisure. He decided to start listening to travel podcasts, particularly those focused on cultural differences and how to communicate with people in different countries. After listening to each episode, George would write about the cultural tips he had learned, focusing on the language used to describe customs and traditions. This helped him not only improve his vocabulary, but also understand how to communicate more effectively in different cultural contexts. As George continued with this practice, he became more confident in his travel-related English. He could talk about his experiences with others and explain cultural practices more clearly. His writing improved as well, and he was able to describe his travels and experiences with more detail and fluency. By combining listening and writing, George was able to improve his overall communication skills and feel more confident when traveling to new places. This approach is really powerful because it helps you practice English in the same way that native speakers use it every day. Whether you're listening to a podcast, watching a video, or having a conversation, you're always exposed to new vocabulary, phrases, and ideas. When you write about these topics afterward, you're reinforcing the new language and making it your own. This combination of listening and writing is one of the best ways to improve your English skill. One of my friends, Emma, has been working on improving her English for a very specific reason. She's planning to move to an English-speaking country to work. Emma is an accountant, and she wants to be able to communicate smoothly in both social and professional situations. Emma realized that simply listening to podcasts about accounting or business wasn't enough. She needed to practice both listening and writing in a more integrated way. So she decided to listen to a variety of podcasts, not just those about her field, but also those about everyday life, travel, and social events. By listening to conversations about things like how people prepare for a trip, how they talk about their hobbies, or how they discuss family matters, Emma got a lot of exposure to natural language. After listening to each episode, she would write a short reflection about what she had learned. If the podcast discussed a topic like how to introduce yourself at a party, Emma would write down a few different ways of introducing herself and practice these sentences in different scenarios. She also made sure to note down new vocabulary and expressions that she found useful for her job as an accountant. By writing about both the professional and casual situations she heard in the podcasts, Emma was able to practice English in many different contexts. One day, Emma listened to an episode about how to talk about your career at a networking event. Afterward, she wrote down a few different ways of describing her job as an accountant, practicing using new vocabulary and making her sentences sound more natural. The next time she attended a networking event, Emma felt confident enough to use the language she had practiced. She was able to introduce herself in a way that felt both professional and relaxed, which helped her make connections and feel more comfortable in social settings. Emma's story shows us that by listening to a variety of podcasts, writing down reflections, and practicing different scenarios, you can improve both your listening and writing skills at the same time. This kind of practice doesn't just help you get better at understanding English, but it also gives you the tools to communicate clearly in both casual and professional situations. If you use this method regularly, you'll be amazed at how much your confidence in speaking and writing grows. Let's talk about another example. My friend Sam is a teacher, and he wanted to improve his English to better communicate with his students and colleagues at school. Sam decided to start listening to podcasts that focused on teaching methods and classroom language. He knew that listening to these podcasts would help him understand how teachers in English-speaking countries interact with their students, which would give him ideas on how to improve his own teaching methods. After listening to each episode, Sam would take notes on important phrases and teaching strategies. He would then write a short lesson plan based on what he had learned. For example, if the podcast discussed different ways to explain a new grammar rule, Sam would write out how he could use the same techniques in his own classroom. Writing down these lesson plans not only helped Sam practice his writing, but also allowed him to reinforce the language he had learned from the podcasts. He was able to apply this knowledge directly in his teaching, and his students noticed how much more engaging his lessons became. By combining listening to podcasts with writing lesson plans, Sam was able to improve both his listening comprehension and writing skills, which in turn made him a more effective teacher. This practice worked for him because it was directly related to his work and his goals. The more he listened to and wrote about the language he wanted to use, the more natural it became for him to incorporate that language into his classroom activities. This kind of method isn't just for teachers. It can be useful for anyone who wants to improve their English in a specific area of life, whether that's business, travel, or even personal relationships. By listening to podcasts or watching videos about a specific topic and then writing about what you've learned, you're not only improving your listening and writing skills, but also expanding your knowledge of the subject. Another example comes from my friend John, who is a small business owner. John wanted to improve his English to communicate better with his international clients. He often found himself struggling with formal email writing and understanding the business language used in emails and meetings. So, John decided to listen to business podcasts and focus on the vocabulary and phrases used in professional communication. He paid special attention to how people wrote emails, made requests, and negotiated in English. After each podcast episode, John would write an email or a message that followed the same structure he heard in the podcast. For example, after listening to an episode about writing a professional email requesting a meeting, John would practice writing his own email to a client, asking for a meeting to discuss a project. He found this practice very helpful because it allowed him to focus on the specific language he needed to improve. It was also great because John didn't just practice writing in isolation. He was learning real phrases that he could use in his actual work. Over time, John's confidence in writing business emails grew. He started receiving positive feedback from his clients, who appreciated his clear and professional communication. John felt more comfortable in meetings, knowing he could write and speak using the right vocabulary and phrases. This is another example of how listening to podcasts or watching videos about your specific area of interest and then writing about it can have a huge impact on your language learning progress. You don't have to work in a business setting to use this method. Whether you're a student, a parent, or just someone who wants to improve their English for everyday use, the same principle applies. You can choose podcasts or videos on topics that interest you, listen to them, and then practice writing about what you've heard. If you're learning English for travel, listen to podcasts about popular destinations or cultural experiences and write about what you've learned. If you're learning English to communicate with others in your community, listen to podcasts that cover topics like local events, hobbies, or social gatherings. After listening, write down any phrases or vocabulary you want to remember and practice, using them in your conversations. This method is especially powerful because it helps you connect the listening and writing skills in a meaningful way. The more you practice, the easier it will become to recognize and use new vocabulary, phrases, and expressions. You'll also notice that your writing becomes more fluid and your ability to speak naturally improves because you're constantly listening to real-world examples and using them in your own communication. Let me share one more example. My friend, Sarah, is a travel enthusiast who loves visiting new places. Sarah wanted to improve her English so she could talk more confidently with locals while traveling. She decided to listen to podcasts about travel and culture, focusing on the language used by tourists and locals. After each episode, Sarah would write about her ideal vacation and describe the places she wanted to visit. She also made sure to write down any phrases or vocabulary related to travel, such as book a flight, check in at the hotel, or local cuisine. By practicing writing about her travel experiences and using the new vocabulary she learned, Sarah improved both her writing and speaking skills. She became more comfortable talking about her trips, making reservations, and asking for directions in English. Sarah's story shows how useful listening to travel-related podcasts can be for anyone who wants to feel more confident while traveling. By writing down the vocabulary and phrases from the podcasts, Sarah was able to internalize them and use them in real-life situations when she traveled to different countries. This method of listening and writing is effective because it helps you actively engage with the language. Instead of just passively listening, you're taking the time to reflect on what you've heard and putting it into practice by writing about it. This strengthens both your listening comprehension and your ability to express yourself clearly in writing. It also boosts your confidence, as you're learning language that's directly applicable to your own life and experiences. As you continue with your English practice, remember that it's all about consistency. The more you listen and write, the better your skills will become. It might take some time, but trust me, it's worth the effort. Keep practicing every day, and you'll see real progress in both your listening and writing abilities. The key is to make it a habit and keep pushing yourself to listen to more diverse content, write more regularly, and use the language you're learning in meaningful ways. By doing this, you'll be well on your way to becoming a more fluent and confident English speaker. Let's take the example of John, who's a writer. John loves reading, but he wanted to work on improving his English for writing stories, essays, and blog posts. He already had a good grasp of grammar, but he struggled with making his writing sound natural. So John started listening to podcasts about storytelling, creative writing, and even personal experiences shared by other writers. After listening to an episode, he would try to write a short story or blog post based on the topic discussed. For example, after hearing a podcast about writing suspense in stories, John would try to create a short, suspenseful narrative. John found that by listening to different styles of writing being discussed in the podcast, and then trying to apply those techniques in his own writing, his stories began to improve. He paid special attention to how the speakers used certain words, phrases, and sentence structures to convey suspense, emotion, or excitement. For instance, one of the podcasts taught John how to build tension in a story using simple language that slowly builds up a sense of urgency. After hearing this advice, John practiced writing a story where he created tension through his choice of words and pacing. Writing it out allowed him to internalize the techniques he had just learned, but it wasn't just about applying writing techniques. John also used his writing exercises to reflect on the podcast itself. After finishing each writing task, he would write a summary of the podcast episode in his own words. This allowed him to practice summarizing information in English, which is an important skill in both writing and speaking. By combining listening, writing, and summarizing, John not only improved his writing skills, but also enhanced his overall comprehension and ability to retain information. This approach is useful because it helps reinforce what you've learned from the podcast. When you listen and then write about the material, it helps you remember it better and understand it more deeply. You're not just hearing the words, you're making them your own by using them in a way that's meaningful to you. This connection between listening and writing also makes it easier to express yourself when speaking because you've already practiced putting your thoughts into words, even if it's just on paper. Another example of how listening and writing can go hand in hand comes from my friend Lisa, who's a mother and a part-time language teacher. Lisa wanted to improve her English so that she could teach her own children more effectively. She started listening to podcasts about parenting and education. After each episode, she would write a brief reflection on the key points she learned, focusing on how she could apply them in her own life and teaching. For example, after listening to a podcast on how to motivate children to learn, Lisa would write down some ideas for activities and strategies she could use with her own kids. Writing these reflections helped Lisa remember the key ideas from the podcast, but it also gave her the opportunity to use the vocabulary and phrases she had heard. For example, she learned expressions like set clear goals, praise effort, and create a positive learning environment. Lisa then made sure to use these phrases when talking to her children. She practiced writing them in her reflection first, and then used them in conversations with her family. By connecting her writing to real-world actions, she became more confident using these phrases in her everyday interactions. What Lisa's story shows us is how useful it can be to listen to podcasts about topics that directly relate to your life. It's not only about listening for language practice, but also about learning practical skills that you can implement in your day-to-day life. Whether you're a parent, teacher, student, or business professional, this method helps you apply what you're learning in a meaningful and practical way. Another person who found success with this method is Michael, a university student who was struggling with academic writing. Michael was studying engineering, and while he understood the technical content in his textbooks, he often found it difficult to write reports and essays in a clear, formal style. He decided to start listening to academic podcasts related to engineering and science. These podcasts often discuss the types of vocabulary, sentence structures, and writing styles that are used in academic writing. After listening to each podcast, Michael would write a brief academic essay or a research proposal using the language and techniques he had learned. For example, one podcast episode discussed how to structure an introduction in a research paper. Michael practiced writing his own research paper introduction by applying the structure he had just heard in the podcast. He was careful to use formal language and academic phrases like "the purpose of this study," "previous research has shown," and "this paper aims to explore." By listening to the podcasts and writing academic pieces based on what he had learned, Michael's writing improved. He was able to write more clearly and formally, using language that was appropriate for his field. But even more importantly, Michael's listening skills improved because he was hearing academic language being used in a real-world context. By engaging with the language both by listening and writing, he became more comfortable with academics. Writing, which made his university assignments much easier to complete. You can also use this method to improve your vocabulary in specific areas of interest. For example, if you're studying business English, you can listen to podcasts that discuss common business phrases, negotiations, and management techniques. After each episode, try writing a summary of the key points, incorporating the new vocabulary you've learned. This will not only help you expand your vocabulary, but also ensure that you can use the new words in context. In addition to the obvious benefits of improving your listening and writing skills, this method also helps you become more confident in your ability to understand different accents and speaking styles. If you're listening to podcasts from different speakers, you'll get used to hearing English spoken in various accents, whether it's American, British, or Australian English. This diversity will make it easier for you to understand native speakers in real-life conversations, which is one of the most challenging aspects of learning English. As you practice, try to find podcasts that challenge you, but also ones that are interesting and engaging. The more you enjoy what you're listening to, the more likely you'll be to stick with it. Listen actively, take notes, and write about what you've learned. This combination of listening, writing, and reflecting will help you improve your skills faster and in a more natural way. Just like how John, Lisa, Michael, and Emma improved their English by listening and writing, you, too, can achieve similar results if you follow this method. To make this process even more effective, try to set specific goals for yourself. For example, you can aim to listen to 2 episodes a week and write a reflection after each one. Over time, you'll notice significant improvements not only in your listening comprehension, but also in your ability to write clearly and confidently. These improvements will naturally transfer to your speaking as well, because when you practice writing and speaking about the same topic, your ability to recall words and phrases when speaking will increase. Now that you've heard how different people have used this method to improve their language skills, it's your turn to start applying it. Whether you're preparing for an exam, working on a specific project, or just learning English for everyday conversations, listening and writing will help you make steady progress. Stick with it, be consistent, and let me tell you about another person, Sarah, who is working hard to improve her business English. Sarah works for an international company and needs to communicate effectively with clients and colleagues from around the world. She found that although she understood a lot of business vocabulary, she struggled with writing professional emails and presentations in a way that was clear, concise, and sounded natural. One day, Sarah started listening to podcasts that focused on business English. These podcasts were filled with tips on how to write professional emails, how to negotiate successfully, and how to structure presentations. After each episode, Sarah made it a point to write down the key phrases and vocabulary that the hosts used. For example, in one episode, the host explained how to politely decline a business proposal without offending the other party. Sarah took that example and used the phrases she had learned to craft a response to an email she had been meaning to send. By practicing in this way, Sarah began to feel more confident in her ability to write professional emails that were clear, polite, and appropriate for the workplace. Sarah's experience shows how important it is to listen to podcasts or content that are relevant to your specific goals. Whether you're a student, a professional, or simply looking to improve your conversational English, finding content that matches your level and interests can make learning much more enjoyable. Once you've listened to a podcast, try writing a reflection or summary of what you've learned. This will not only help reinforce your new vocabulary, but also help you practice the structure of the language. For example, Sarah took the advice she learned from the business podcast and wrote a follow-up email to a client. In the email, she made sure to use some of the formal phrases she had learned, like, "I appreciate your time," "Thank you for your consideration," and "I look forward to your response." The more Sarah listened and wrote, the more her confidence grew. She no longer felt nervous when writing emails and was able to communicate more effectively with her colleagues and clients. Another important skill that can improve by combining listening and writing is your ability to write with clarity. Let's take the example of Tom, who's studying law and needs to write legal documents. Tom listens to podcasts that discuss legal cases, court procedures, and how to structure legal arguments. After each episode, Tom writes a short essay or case analysis on the topic he just heard. By practicing his writing this way, he gets a deeper understanding of how to present his arguments logically and clearly. What Tom quickly realized is that listening to experts in the field of law helped him understand how legal language works. By writing down what he had learned, he was able to apply it in his own legal writing. He started using more formal legal phrases and structuring his essays in a way that was more professional and clear. Tom's experience demonstrates how combining listening to experts in a field and then applying that knowledge through writing can boost both your comprehension and writing skills. You don't always have to start with formal or technical content, though. You can also use this method to improve your general writing and listening skills by engaging with personal stories. Take Claire, for example. She loves reading personal stories about people's experiences, whether it's overcoming challenges, traveling the world, or achieving personal goals. Claire listens to podcasts where people share their real-life stories, and after listening, she writes about how she would have reacted in a similar situation. In one podcast, Claire listened to a story about a person who had moved to a new city and started over. The person shared their experiences of adapting to a new culture, meeting new people, and finding a job. Claire was inspired by the story and wrote a journal entry describing what it would be like if she had to move to a new country for work. She wrote about the challenges she might face, the things she would miss from home, and the excitement of exploring a new place. This type of reflective writing helped Claire practice using descriptive language and expressing her emotions in English. It also allowed her to use the vocabulary she had heard in the podcast and apply it to her own life. Claire's story shows how personal experiences and listening to others' journeys can provide great inspiration for improving your English writing. When you listen to real-life stories, you gain insight into how people express their thoughts and emotions. By writing your own reflections or personal stories, you practice connecting your own experiences to the language you've learned. Another way you can use listening and writing together is by practicing note-taking. Let me explain how this works with an example from Dave, a university student studying history. Dave often listens to history podcasts because he wants to improve his knowledge of historical events while also developing his English writing skills. He started taking notes while listening to the podcasts. After each episode, Dave would review his notes and turn them into a more detailed summary or essay. For example, Dave listened to an episode about the American Revolution and took notes on key events, dates, and people involved. Later, he used those notes to write a summary of the causes and consequences of the revolution. Writing out the summary allowed Dave to practice organizing his thoughts and using appropriate academic language. This method helped him retain important information, while also giving him practice with writing formal academic English. Note-taking is a fantastic way to connect listening with writing. It helps you focus on the key points of the content and encourages you to think critically about what you're hearing. By reviewing your notes and turning them into written summaries or essays, you're reinforcing what you've learned while also improving your writing skills. One of the most powerful aspects of this method is that it forces you to actively engage with the language. When you listen and then write, you're not just passively absorbing information. You're processing it, making sense of it, and expressing it in your own words. This deep level of engagement is what helps you develop both your listening and writing skills at a much faster pace. The more you practice this, the more you'll notice that your language skills are improving across the board. You'll be able to listen to podcasts or conversations with more ease, understand new vocabulary and expressions, and express yourself more confidently when writing. Whether you're writing emails, essays, reports, or just journaling, you'll start to see a big difference in your writing quality. Now let's talk about how you can make the most out of your learning routine by setting goals and tracking progress. If you're serious about improving your English, you need to set clear goals for yourself. For instance, you might decide that for the next 2 weeks, you'll listen to 3 episodes of a podcast each week, take notes, and write a summary after each one. By the end of 2 weeks, you can review your progress and see how much your writing has improved. Maybe you'll notice that you're using more complex vocabulary, writing more clearly, or expressing your thoughts in a more organized way. Tracking your progress is important because it helps you stay motivated and gives you something tangible to work towards. It also allows you to reflect on what you've learned and identify areas where you can continue to improve. For example, if you find that you're struggling with certain grammar points or sentence structures, you can focus on practicing those in your writing exercises. By combining listening and writing, you're not only improving your English, but also gaining valuable skills that will help you in your personal and professional life. Whether you're a student, a professional, or just someone who wants to communicate better in English, this method is one of the most effective ways to learn. The more you practice, the better you'll become at expressing yourself, whether in writing or speaking. As we continue in this episode, think about how you can apply these strategies to your own learning journey. Whether you're listening to podcasts about your favorite topics, business strategies, or personal growth stories, take notes, write summaries, and reflect on what you've learned. By doing this regularly, to make this even clearer, let me share another example. Meet David, a young professional working in marketing. David has always been comfortable speaking English but found it difficult to write reports and presentations. He knew the vocabulary and phrases, but when it came to writing professionally, he would often get stuck, unsure how to structure his ideas clearly. He decided to use a method that involved both listening and writing. David began by listening to marketing podcasts. These podcasts included interviews with professionals, discussions about trends, and tips on how to write effective marketing content. After listening to each podcast, David would take notes on the key points, such as strategies discussed or specific language used in marketing materials. Once he finished listening, David would write a short summary of the episode, including the most important takeaways. By writing down the key points, David started applying the advice and language from the podcast directly to his work. For example, one episode discussed the importance of creating strong call-to-action phrases in marketing materials. David listened carefully to how the speakers used different call-to-action phrases, then wrote down his own examples. Later, when he had to create a new marketing campaign for his company, he incorporated these phrases into the copy he wrote. This practice of listening, taking notes, and then writing helped David feel more confident when working on his marketing projects. He could now listen to a podcast and immediately think about how to apply what he learned to his work. As he continued, his writing became more professional and natural, and he gained more confidence in his ability to communicate clearly and effectively in English. David's story is a great example of how combining listening and writing can help you not only improve your language skills, but also enhance your professional abilities. When you learn through real-world examples like the ones found in podcasts, you can apply that knowledge to your own experiences, whether it's at work, in school, or in your personal life. Another important aspect of this method is improving your ability to paraphrase. When you listen to podcasts, you often hear different ways of expressing the same ideas. For example, if you listen to an episode about managing stress, you might hear the host talk about relaxation techniques in several different ways. You might hear phrases like taking a break, relaxing your mind, or finding time to unwind. After listening to these different expressions, you can practice paraphrasing by writing your own version of the information you've learned. This exercise not only reinforces your understanding, but also helps you learn to express yourself in various ways. As you improve your ability to paraphrase, you'll find it easier to understand different speakers and communicate more effectively, both in writing and speaking. Let's take an example from Julia, a student studying environmental science. Julia listens to podcasts that discuss environmental issues such as climate change, pollution, and sustainability. After each episode, Julia writes a summary of the main points. Sometimes she rewrites the summary in her own words, paraphrasing the main ideas to practice using different vocabulary. This helps her learn how to express complex ideas in simpler language while still being accurate. Julia's practice of paraphrasing not only helps her with her English, but also helps her better understand the scientific concepts she's studying. She can now explain environmental issues more clearly, both in written assignments and in conversations. Julia's approach shows how paraphrasing after listening can help you expand your vocabulary, improve your understanding, and boost your confidence in using English. To further improve your listening and writing skills, let's talk about active listening. Active listening is a powerful technique where you don't just passively hear the words. Instead, you engage with the content. You pay attention to the speaker's tone, pauses, and how they structure their sentences. Active listening requires you to focus not only on the vocabulary, but also on how the speaker organizes their ideas and delivers their message. For example, when you listen to an episode about travel experiences, pay attention to how the speaker describes places, activities, and emotions. How do they transition from one idea to another? Do they use questions to engage the listener? Do they use descriptive language to make the experience feel vivid and real? After actively listening, try to write a summary of what you heard. This exercise will help you organize your thoughts the way the speaker did. For example, if the speaker talks about traveling to Paris, note how they describe the excitement of arriving, their experiences with the culture, and the sights they saw. Then, in your summary, use similar descriptive language to convey the same ideas. Active listening helps you become a more attentive listener and a better writer because it encourages you to notice the details in the language. You'll begin to recognize common phrases and sentence structures that you can use in your own writing. By practicing active listening and writing, you'll develop the ability to listen to spoken English with greater focus and write more clearly. In addition to active listening, let's talk about using different types of media to improve your skills. Not all podcasts are the same, and exploring a variety of content can help you learn new vocabulary and sentence structures. For example, you can listen to podcasts about news, culture, history, or personal stories. Each of these topics will expose you to different vocabulary and communication styles. Let's look at Daniel, who is learning English for academic purposes. Daniel listens to podcasts that cover news stories, history, and science. After listening, he writes a summary of the main points in each episode. Sometimes Daniel listens to podcasts that are more conversational in tone, while other times, he listens to podcasts with more formal language. By listening to both types of content, Daniel has expanded his vocabulary and improved his ability to write in both casual and formal styles. Daniel's experience shows how important it is to diversify the types of content you listen to. If you only listen to one type of podcast, you might limit your vocabulary to specific topics. By mixing it up, you'll gain exposure to a wider range of language and learn how to adapt your writing style for different situations. Now, let's talk about how to use podcasts to improve your academic writing. If you're a student or someone who needs to write academic papers, it's helpful to listen to podcasts that focus on academic topics or discuss academic writing skills. After listening, try writing an academic summary or a critical response to the episode. This will help you practice using formal language and developing your ideas in a clear and logical way. For example, Emily, a university student studying psychology, listens to academic podcasts about psychological theories and research. After each episode, she writes a critical response, analyzing the ideas presented and comparing them to other research. This helps Emily improve her academic writing by giving her practice in structuring her arguments and using appropriate academic language. By combining listening to academic podcasts and writing summaries or critical responses, Emily not only improves her English skills but also becomes better at analyzing and presenting academic content. This technique will help you build your academic writing skills and become more confident in expressing your thoughts in English. Lastly, let's talk about how to use this method to improve your creative writing. Creative writing is a great way to practice English because it allows you to express your ideas in unique and imaginative ways. You can listen to podcasts that share personal stories, fictional narratives, or even interviews with authors. After listening, try writing your own short story or personal reflection, incorporating some of the techniques you've learned. Let's look at Harry, who loves creative writing. He listens to podcasts where authors discuss their writing process and share tips on how to improve storytelling. After each episode, Harry writes a short story or poem based on the themes he's learned. He also practices writing character descriptions, settings, and dialogue. By using podcasts as inspiration, Harry improves his creative writing skills while learning new vocabulary and expressions. This method allows him to become more comfortable with storytelling in English and develop his own writing style. We can think of English learning as a tool that not only helps you speak and write better, but also builds your confidence in using the language. Imagine being able to not only hold a conversation, but also express your thoughts clearly in writing, whether it's for an email, a report, or a message to a colleague. That's what makes combining listening and writing so powerful. By practicing both, you not only understand the words better, but also know how to put them together in your own writing. Let's start with another example of how this can work in your everyday life. Meet Tom. Tom is an engineer who speaks English pretty well, but he struggles when it comes to writing professional emails. His biggest challenge was understanding how to sound formal, but also clear in his communications. He decided to start listening to podcasts related to business and communication. Tom listened carefully to how the speakers in the podcasts delivered their messages. He paid attention to the structure of their emails and the language they used to remain professional, yet approachable. After each podcast, Tom would write an email based on the topics discussed. For example, after listening to an episode about writing effective emails, Tom would draft an email as if he were addressing a colleague in another company. What he found was that by writing these emails after listening to examples of good communication, he started to internalize useful phrases and formal structures. He could now compose emails with more confidence. One day, he had to write an email to a client about a project update. Thanks to his practice with listening and writing, he knew exactly how to express himself politely and clearly, which helped him build a stronger relationship with the client. Tom's story shows how practicing listening and writing together can help you improve professional skills. You can apply this same strategy to your job or any other area where you need to communicate effectively in English. The key is to use real-life examples to shape your learning and practice. Another example comes from Anna, a teacher who loves helping students improve their English. Anna wanted to develop her own writing skills further, particularly when it came to writing reports and creating lesson plans. She began listening to educational podcasts that focused on teaching strategies and language skills. After listening, she would write a reflection on the strategies discussed in the episode. For example, one episode focused on teaching vocabulary in creative ways. Anna listened to how the speakers used storytelling to introduce new words. Afterward, she wrote a lesson plan that incorporated storytelling into vocabulary lessons for her own students. This allowed Anna to put into practice what she had learned in a way that was both useful and fun. Through this method, Anna's writing skills improved because she was practicing creating clear and structured content. Her lesson plans became more engaging and informative, and her students benefited from the creative vocabulary lessons she was able to implement. This method of listening and writing can be applied to any profession, hobby, or area where you want to improve your language skills. The beauty of this strategy is that it allows you to learn from experts and then put what you've learned into practice, making your learning more active and hands-on. You can also apply this technique when learning a new language or improving an area of knowledge that requires a deep understanding of technical terms. Let's look at Edward, who works in the medical field. Edward wanted to improve his ability to understand medical English and write detailed reports. He listened to podcasts about medical research and patient care. Edward would take notes while listening to each episode, focusing on the specific terminology used by the experts. Afterward, he would write summaries of what he had learned, paying close attention to the technical vocabulary. For example, after listening to a podcast episode about patient care techniques, Edward would write a short report on how to apply those techniques in real-world scenarios. This approach helped Edward become more confident in understanding and using medical terminology. It also improved his ability to write more effectively in a professional context, such as when he had to write medical reports or communicate with colleagues. Edward's experience highlights how combining listening and writing can be especially effective when learning highly technical or specialized vocabulary. The process of actively engaging with the material through listening and then using it in writing helps you retain the information and apply it effectively in your field of expertise. By now, I hope you're beginning to see how this method can be adapted to any profession, hobby, or area of interest. The more you practice listening and writing together, the more you will notice the positive impact on both your understanding and your ability to express yourself clearly and effectively. Let's now think about how this method works for improving everyday communication skills. Take Lisa, who is learning English as a second language. Lisa is a stay-at-home mom who wants to improve her ability to write simple messages, emails, and communicate with people in her community. She started listening to podcasts about parenting, daily life, and communication tips. After each episode, Lisa would write down any new phrases or vocabulary that she found useful. For example, after listening to an episode on how to organize family schedules, Lisa would write down key phrases like family meeting, time management, and setting priorities. She then used these phrases in her daily life when talking to her husband and kids. Not only did this help Lisa expand her vocabulary, but it also gave her more confidence in using English when communicating in her family life. She could now discuss important family matters in a more organized and fluent way. In addition, Lisa found that by writing about her experiences, she was able to process her thoughts and express herself more clearly in conversations. Lisa's story is a great reminder that combining listening and writing can be beneficial in everyday situations, not just at work or in academic contexts. By practicing this method, you'll be able to communicate more effectively in all areas of your life, from personal relationships to daily tasks. Now, let's think about how to apply this strategy to creative writing. Imagine you're someone who enjoys writing stories or essays. You could listen to podcasts that feature interviews with writers or discussions about writing techniques. These episodes can offer valuable advice on how to structure your stories, develop characters, and improve your narrative voice. Take Ben, for example. Ben loves writing fiction, but he often struggles with how to start his stories. He listens to podcasts where authors talk about their writing process and share tips on overcoming writer's block. After listening, Ben writes short stories inspired by the themes or techniques discussed in the episodes. By practicing this way, Ben has become a more creative and confident writer. He uses the writing advice he hears in podcasts to shape his own work, and over time, his stories have become more engaging and well-structured. Writing based on real-life examples or expert advice is an excellent way to practice writing while also honing your listening skills. This approach helps not just in creative writing, but in any form of writing. Whether it's writing reports, essays, or even blog posts, listening to others talk about how they approach writing can help you learn new strategies and techniques that you can use in your own work. The power of combining listening and writing lies in its ability to help you understand how language is used in different contexts and how you can apply that to your own writing. Whether you're listening to a podcast about business, personal development, education, or storytelling, each episode offers insights that can be turned into writing practice. Ultimately, the more you listen to others and write down your thoughts, the more you will develop your writing skills. You'll become more familiar with sentence structures, vocabulary, and ways to express yourself clearly. Whether you're writing professionally, academically, or creatively, this combination of skills will help you achieve greater fluency and confidence in English. The key to improving both listening and writing is to practice regularly. Try to listen to a podcast every day, take notes, and write something based on what you've learned. The more you practice, the better you'll become, and the more natural it will feel. With time, you'll see how listening and writing together can lead. I'm glad you're finding this helpful. Let's continue building on the idea of combining listening and writing and dive even deeper into how this can help improve your skills. By now, you've seen how this method works for different scenarios, but there's so much more to explore. This approach doesn't just help you understand language better, but it also makes you a more confident communicator in English. Let's take a closer look at some more detailed examples of how this can play out in different situations. Let's start with John, a young professional who recently moved to the UK. John was good at speaking English, but he realized that his writing skills needed improvement. He often found himself unsure of how to write professional emails or reports. To improve, John started listening to podcasts that focused on business English and professional communication. For example, one podcast episode discussed how to structure a formal email when communicating with colleagues and clients. John found the advice helpful, particularly the part about how to introduce yourself properly, make your request clear, and end the email politely. After listening, John immediately sat down to write a similar email to a colleague, asking for an update on a project. He made sure to include the key phrases he had learned from the podcast, like, "I would appreciate it if you could," and "please let me know if you need any further information." By practicing in this way, John quickly became more confident in his email writing. The process of listening to real examples from professionals, then applying what he learned by writing his own emails helped him make great progress. Over time, he noticed that his emails became clearer and more effective. John's ability to communicate professionally in English improved, which made him feel more comfortable at work and contributed to his career growth. Next, let's look at another example from Sarah, a college student who is studying to become a teacher. Sarah had been struggling with writing essays and academic papers in English. She found it difficult to organize her thoughts and present her ideas in a clear and concise way. So, Sarah decided to start listening to podcasts related to academic writing and research. In one episode, the host discussed how to structure an academic essay, starting with a strong introduction, followed by clearly defined body paragraphs, and ending with a conclusion that ties everything together. The episode also provided examples of how to use transitional phrases to connect ideas smoothly. After listening, Sarah immediately went to her study desk and started writing an essay on a topic she had been assigned. She made sure to use the structures and phrases she had learned from the podcast. The more Sarah practiced writing after listening to these podcasts, the better she got at organizing her ideas. Her essays started becoming more structured, and she was able to express her points more clearly. The improvement was not only in her academic writing, but also in her ability to critically analyze information and communicate her thoughts effectively in English. Sarah was also able to take the strategies she learned in the podcast and apply them to her classroom discussions, helping her become a more effective communicator, both in writing and speaking. In addition to academic writing, this method can be extremely useful for those who want to improve their general writing skills. Take Mike, for instance. Mike is passionate about writing short stories and has always been interested in creative writing. However, he found that his stories often lacked strong dialogue or clear character development. So, Mike began listening to podcasts featuring interviews with successful authors and writing coaches. In one episode, an author shared tips on how to write realistic dialogue and create complex characters that readers can connect with. Mike took note of the author's advice on how to make characters speak in a way that reflects their personality, background, and emotions. After listening, Mike immediately sat down to revise one of his short stories, focusing on improving the dialogue and developing his characters further. He experimented with writing scenes where the characters' dialogue revealed more about their personalities and motivations. As Mike continued to listen to more episodes and apply what he learned in his writing, he noticed a significant improvement in his short stories. His characters became more interesting and believable, and the dialogue felt more natural. Mike's writing became more engaging, and he gained more confidence in his ability to write creatively in English. This experience not only improved his writing, but also gave him a better understanding of storytelling techniques that he could use in his future work. Let's move on to a different area of writing: business and workplace communication. Meet Kate, a project manager at a multinational company. Kate's job required her to write detailed project plans, reports, and email updates for both her team and clients. Although she had a good command of English, she sometimes struggled to write reports that were both clear and professional. So, Kate decided to start listening to podcasts that focused on business communication and writing skills. In one episode, the podcast host discussed how to write effective project proposals. The host emphasized the importance of clearly outlining the project goals, deliverables, timeline, and budget. After listening, Kate applied this advice by drafting a project proposal for an upcoming project at work. She made sure to follow the structure outlined in the podcast and included clear headings and bullet points to make the proposal easy to read. Kate also took note of how the podcast host used polite but direct language to make requests and clarify expectations. She began using similar language in her own project reports and emails. As a result, Kate's writing became more professional and effective. She felt more confident in her ability to communicate complex ideas in writing, and her colleagues started to take note of how clear and well-structured her reports were. This experience highlights how listening to podcasts in a professional context can help you improve your writing in specific areas like business communication. Whether you are writing emails, reports, or proposals, you can learn valuable strategies for making your writing more effective and professional by listening to experts and applying what you've learned. Now let's look at how listening and writing can improve English skills in everyday situations. Meet Robert, a retiree who has recently started learning English. He wanted to improve his writing skills so he could write personal letters to his family and friends. However, Robert found it challenging to express his thoughts clearly in writing. To improve, Robert started listening to podcasts that focused on simple conversations and everyday language use. After each episode, he would write a letter to his son, updating him on his life. Robert focused on using the phrases and vocabulary he learned from the podcast episodes in his letters. He found that listening to how native speakers use the I language in different contexts helped him understand the structure and tone of everyday communication. As Robert continued practicing in this way, he noticed a significant improvement in his writing. His letters became more detailed and easier to understand, and he started to feel more confident in his ability to express his thoughts in writing. By practicing both listening and writing together, Robert was able to strengthen his skills in a meaningful way, improving his ability to communicate with his family and friends. This method of listening and writing practice can be applied to many different types of writing, from personal communication to professional documents. By regularly listening to content related to your area of interest and writing about what you learn, you can improve your writing skills and become more confident in your ability to express yourself clearly. The key takeaway here is that the more you listen to real-life examples of how language is used and practice writing based on what you've heard, the more your writing and overall language skills will improve. This method not only helps you develop your vocabulary and grammar, but also teaches you how to use language effectively in different situations, whether in formal or informal contexts. As you continue to practice, you will notice that your confidence in both listening and writing will grow. You'll be able to understand spoken English more easily, write more clearly, and express yourself more naturally. The combination of listening to high-quality content and writing about it is. Let's start with James, a young man who works as an engineer in a big company. James had been learning English for several years but found it difficult to write technical reports and emails to clients. He would often get stuck when trying to explain complex concepts clearly. So, James decided to incorporate more listening practice into his routine to help improve his writing skills. He began listening to podcasts related to engineering, focusing on the language and terms used in the field. One episode, for example, discussed how to write clear and concise technical reports. The host explained the importance of using precise language and breaking down complex information into simpler sections. After listening to the episode, James felt confident enough to write his first technical report in English. He applied the tips from the podcast, using headings, bullet points, and clear transitions between sections. James also practiced writing summaries of what he learned in the podcast. By doing so, he was able to internalize the new vocabulary and structures. Over time, he noticed that his reports were becoming much clearer and more organized. His colleagues also noticed the improvement in his work, and he received positive feedback from his manager. This process of listening and writing helped James not only improve his technical English, but also become more comfortable in expressing complex ideas in writing. Now, let's turn to Emily, a high school teacher who was teaching English as a second language to her students. Emily wanted to improve her own English writing skills, especially for preparing lesson plans and reports for her school. She realized that listening to how other educators write and speak about teaching could provide valuable insights into how she could improve her own writing. Emily began listening to podcasts featuring interviews with experienced ESL teachers and education experts. One episode in particular discussed how to write lesson plans that are engaging and easy to follow. The host explained how to structure a lesson plan from the introduction to the conclusion and how to keep students engaged throughout. Emily took detailed notes during the episode, and afterward, she tried to write a lesson plan for her next class using the ideas she had learned. The more Emily listened to episodes and applied the advice to her own writing, the better she got at preparing lesson plans. She also found that she was able to communicate more effectively with her colleagues and students. Her writing became more organized, and her lesson plans were much clearer. Emily realized that the key to her improvement was not just listening, but also practicing writing after each episode, helping her internalize the content and make it her own. Let's look at another example, Sophia, who works as a marketing manager for a startup. Sophia needed to improve her writing for business purposes such as creating marketing copy, writing newsletters, and communicating with clients. She had learned a lot of English in her earlier years, but needed to refine her writing for the professional environment she now worked in. So, she decided to use podcasts as a tool for improvement. Sophia found a podcast that focused on business, writing, and communication. In one episode, the host discussed how to write compelling copy for advertisements and emails. Sophia was particularly interested in how to grab the reader's attention quickly and make the content more persuasive. After listening to the episode, she immediately applied the advice by writing a new email campaign for the company's latest product launch. She focused on creating a strong opening sentence, using engaging language and offering a clear call to action. Sophia was amazed at how quickly her writing improved. By listening to professionals in the marketing field and applying their tips to her own work, she was able to write more persuasive and effective copy. She received positive feedback from her manager, who noticed how much more engaging her email campaigns were. Sophia felt more confident in her writing, and she continued to use podcasts to refine her skills in various areas of business communication. Let's move on to another example from a different perspective. Meet Richard, who is an entrepreneur running his own small business. Richard has been working hard to grow his business, and he knows that communication is key. He wanted to improve his ability to write persuasive business proposals and communicate effectively with potential clients. Richard decided to listen to podcasts about business communication and proposal writing. In one episode, the host explained how to structure a business proposal, highlighting the importance of addressing the client's needs, offering a clear solution, and demonstrating the value of your service. Richard took detailed notes and started writing his own business proposals, applying the techniques he had learned. The more Richard practiced writing after listening to these podcasts, the more he saw improvements in his proposals. He was able to make them more focused, professional, and tailored to his clients' needs. Richard's business also began to grow, and he realized that his improved writing skills played a significant role in his success. By combining listening to expert advice and practicing writing, Richard was able to take his business communication to the next level. We can also look at Anna, a university student studying abroad in an English-speaking country. Anna had to write academic essays and reports in English as part of her coursework. Although her spoken English was good, she found that writing essays was much more difficult. She often struggled with organizing her ideas and making her arguments clear. To improve, Anna started listening to podcasts about academic writing. One episode focused on how to write a strong thesis statement and how to build an argument step by step. After listening, Anna tried to write an essay about a subject she was studying, focusing on creating a clear thesis statement and supporting it with evidence from her research. She used the tips she learned in the podcast, and as a result, her essay was much better organized and easier to follow. Anna continued practicing by listening to more episodes about academic writing and applying the advice she learned to her assignments. Over time, her writing became more structured and her arguments stronger. She began to feel more confident in her academic writing, and her professors took notice of the improvement in the quality of her essays. Anna's experience highlights how listening to expert advice on writing can make a big difference in your ability to write effectively in an academic setting. Now let's explore how this method can be helpful for those who want to write for personal development. Meet Tom, who has always enjoyed journaling but struggled with expressing his thoughts in a clear and organized way. Tom wanted to improve his writing so that his journals would be more meaningful and reflective. Tom decided to listen to podcasts that discussed personal development, mindfulness, and self-reflection. After each episode, he would write a journal entry about what he had learned, focusing on organizing his thoughts and reflecting on the key takeaways from the podcast. Tom found that this method not only helped him improve his writing, but also helped him understand himself better. As Tom continued listening and writing, he noticed that his journal entries became more thoughtful and insightful. He was able to express his feelings and reflections more clearly, and he felt more connected to his personal growth journey. This process of listening and writing allowed Tom to develop both his writing skills and his understanding of himself. As we can see, this method of listening and writing is versatile and can be applied to many different types of writing, whether it's for personal, academic, or professional purposes. It helps you improve your writing by providing you with real-life examples and practical tips that you can immediately apply to your own work. The more you practice this method, the more you'll see improvements in your writing skills and confidence. Let's look at David, a financial analyst working at a large company. David's job involves preparing reports on market trends, financial data, and forecasts for his clients. Although he was skilled at analyzing numbers and data, he found that writing the reports in a clear and engaging way was a challenge. His reports were often filled with jargon and technical terms that were difficult for some clients to understand. David decided to improve his writing by listening to podcasts focused on financial communication and reporting. One episode, for example, discussed how to simplify complex financial data and make it accessible to a wider audience. The host suggested using clear examples, visual aids, and easy-to-understand language when explaining financial concepts. David realized that he needed to change how he wrote his reports, so he started applying these tips. After listening to the episode, David rewrote a report for a client, focusing on breaking down the financial data into simpler terms. He used analogies to explain complex concepts like comparing a company's financial performance to a car engine running smoothly. His goal was to make the report not only informative but also easy to read. The next time he shared a report with a client, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Clients found it much easier to understand, and they appreciated how David had made the information more accessible. David continued using podcasts as a tool for improving his writing. He would listen to episodes about communication strategies, storytelling techniques, and how to write with clarity. As he kept practicing, his writing improved significantly. His reports became more engaging and effective in conveying complex financial information to a broader audience. David also found that the more he listened to experts in his field, the more confident he felt in his writing abilities. Now let's explore a different perspective. Sarah is a small business owner who has been running her own bakery for several years. Sarah loves baking and has built a loyal customer base. But when it comes to marketing her business, she finds herself struggling with the language. She wants to improve her website copy, social media posts, and newsletters to attract more customers and keep her current ones engaged. Sarah started listening to podcasts that focus on business marketing and how to communicate effectively with customers. One episode that stood out was about how to create an authentic brand voice. The host explained that businesses should write in a way that feels personal, friendly, and approachable, which is essential for building strong customer relationships. The host also shared tips on how to write compelling social media captions that grab people's attention and encourage them to take action. Inspired by what she learned, Sarah went home that evening and rewrote the copy on her bakery's website. She made it more conversational and warm, adding personal touches like, "We're baking fresh pastries just for you." Sarah also applied the same approach to her social media posts, focusing on storytelling. She shared behind-the-scenes stories of how she creates her cakes and the care she puts into each recipe. The impact was immediate. Sarah started receiving more inquiries and orders through her website. Her social media following grew, and customers were leaving comments saying they felt more connected to the brand. Sarah realized that listening to marketing experts and applying their tips not only improved her writing, but also helped her grow her business. The more she listened to these experts and practiced writing in her own voice, the more successful she became at communicating her message to her customers. Next, let's talk about Ethan, a university student studying history. Ethan found that writing essays for his history classes was a real struggle. He had no problem with researching and gathering information, but he often felt stuck when it came to organizing his thoughts and expressing his arguments clearly. Ethan knew that improving his writing skills would help him succeed in his studies and future career. Ethan started listening to podcasts about academic writing, particularly those focused on history essays and how to construct strong arguments. One episode offered advice on how to start an essay by developing a thesis statement and using it as a guide for the rest of the paper. The host also suggested breaking down the essay into sections, introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion, to make the writing process less overwhelming. Ethan decided to try this method for his next essay. He started by writing a strong thesis statement and outlined the structure of his paper. As he wrote, he kept referring back to the thesis to ensure his arguments stayed on track. Ethan also made sure to provide evidence from primary and secondary sources to support his points, as he had learned in the podcast. When he submitted the essay, Ethan felt much more confident about the quality of his work. His professor was impressed with how clearly he had made his arguments and how well organized his essay was. Ethan continued to listen to academic writing, podcasts, and refined his writing skills with each new assignment. By listening to experts, he gained a better understanding of how to structure his essays and present his ideas in a clear, persuasive way. Let's now look at Olivia, a graphic designer who works with clients from all over the world. Olivia was confident in her design skills, but often struggled with writing proposals, emails, and client reports. She realized that to succeed in her career, she needed to improve her writing to communicate her ideas more effectively. Olivia started listening to podcasts about business communication and design, specifically focusing on how to write clear proposals and project briefs. One episode focused on how to write a proposal that outlines the project scope, timeline, and budget, while also highlighting the designer's expertise. The host explained that proposals should be both professional and engaging, providing enough detail to reassure clients while keeping the tone friendly and approachable. After listening to the episode, Olivia applied the advice to a proposal she was preparing for a new client. She made sure to clearly outline the project's goals and deliverables, but she also included some personal touches, such as explaining her design process and how she would ensure the client's vision was brought to life. Olivia's proposal stood out because it was clear, organized, and reflected her personality as a designer. The client was impressed with Olivia's proposal, and she was awarded the project. Olivia continued listening to podcasts to improve her business writing, and with each new project, her communication skills became more polished. She found that the more she listened to experts and applied their tips, the better her proposals and emails became, helping her to win more clients and grow her business. Lastly, let's talk about Lucas, a writer who dreams of becoming a published author. Lucas had been writing stories for years but struggled with creating compelling characters and strong narratives. He often felt like his writing lacked depth, and he wasn't sure how to improve it. Lucas began listening to podcasts focused on storytelling, fiction writing, and character development. One episode discussed how to create believable characters that readers could connect with. The host explained that strong characters need to have clear motivations, flaws, and growth throughout the story. The episode also covered how to write dialogue that feels natural and moves the plot forward. Lucas took the advice to heart and began applying it to his own writing. He worked on developing his characters' backstories and gave them motivations that drove their actions. He also practiced writing more natural dialogue, making sure that it revealed something about the character's personality. As Lucas continued to listen to storytelling podcasts and apply the techniques, his writing improved. He felt more confident in his ability to create interesting characters and write compelling narratives. Soon enough, Lucas finished his first novel and submitted it to several publishers. He was excited to receive feedback on how his characters felt more authentic and his story more engaging. The writing process had become much more enjoyable for Lucas, and he knew that his continued practice with listening and writing would help him reach his goal of becoming a published author. As you can see, the power of combining listening with writing is a method that works for all kinds of writing, whether it's business communication, academic writing, personal development, or creative writing. By listening to experts in your field